Hello and welcome to Writing Wednesday. This honestly hasn't been a super writing heavy week for me. If you don't know, this past week was Lunar New Year, and even though my family kind of skipped to the traditional dinner and celebration we usually have for Lunar New Year every year, I kind of took it upon myself to take this week off in general. But one of the things I did do this past week was on Friday, instead of the usual work stream, because my Friday live stream just happened to fall on Lunar New Year Day, I did a live fanfiction reading of my Winx Club fanfiction, Winx Club Evolved. And both reading the fanfiction out loud live, as well as looking back a little bit beforehand, it's made me realize how disconnected I've become to some of the earlier chapters. For some context, I started Winx Club Evolved back in 2015, and I kind of worked on it on and off over the years, but most recently, I picked it back up in December in preparation for the release of the Netflix show Fate the Winx Saga. And in fanfiction in particular, I feel it can be pretty natural for the story to progress farther and farther away from the concepts originally introduced in the earlier chapters. Also, not to mention just the time difference between when I started this fanfiction versus when I'm writing it right now. I was still in high school when I first started writing Winx Club Evolved, and I can pretty confidently say my writing style has really evolved in these past 6 years. So of course there's going to be some inherent differences. Writing this story kind of piecemeal over different phases of my life versus if I had just sat down and written this entire story in one go. But I just thought for this Writing Wednesday, I would go over those first 7 chapters that I read aloud during the live stream and kind of go over what I would do differently if I were to start this fanfiction today. So the first chapter is pretty exposition heavy. It involves the original 6 Winx Club girls returning to Alfea to find that it's not quite the school it used to be. The idea I was trying to get across in this first chapter is that Alfea isn't so much a friendly fairy school anymore as it is a kind of competitive, catty school for exclusively princesses. Now, this is kind of a weird thing depending on which translation of Winx Club you grew up with. In the original Italian RAI Cinelume dub, some of the fairies are princesses, but not all of them. However, in the 4Kids dub, which is the dub I grew up with, all of the fairies that attend Alfea are princesses. Now, I don't remember if I had watched the Cinelume dub at this point, but I know that even in present time, I still kind of default to the 4Kids version. It's the version I grew up with, and it's the version my brain is the most familiar with. So anyway, getting back to the story, I'm not sure how well I actually executed the delivery of the idea of how Alfea has changed. I remember back when I was writing this very first chapter that I was very nervous about the fact that my story is very OC heavy and that the main plot really doesn't feature any of the 6 Winx Club girls at all. So for this first chapter, I really kind of just wanted to shove in all of the 6 main girls in order to reassure my audience that yes, this is still a Winx Club fanfiction, even though for the majority of the rest of the story, you're really not going to see any of the main characters at all. So it's kind of helpful that you get these characters coming in that really aren't informed on the situation, so you have a good reason for giving exposition to catch them up on the current situation, but nothing is ever really gained from telling these 6 characters about the current story because then they kind of just disappear and never really show up again. Also, I think in general, all of these earlier chapters could be longer. For example, I think in this first chapter, I would have included a longer scene, maybe with just some random Alfea students, showing how cliquey and competitive Alfea has become as a school. Also, something to note about Winx Club Evolved is that when I first started writing the story, the most recent Winx Club season was season 6, so this was before the Winx girls had kind of returned to Alfea full-time in season 7, or before the soft reboot of season 8. And finally, chapter 1 introduces 2 of the main characters, Silver, Fairy of the Diamond Moon, and Ancrua, Fairy of Rain. They're roommates, and Silver and Ancrua initially do not get along because Silver really believes in the Winx Club and in the positivity of fairies, whereas Ancrua is more of the current Alfea mindset in which she's very competitive and she wants to be the top fairy at Alfea. I don't have too much of a problem with the scene that introduces them, although it's funny to note that at the time I wrote this, I had never actually roomed with anyone before in a dorm situation, and this is meant to be a middle grade fiction, so I think there is some allowance in how cartoonish the characters can be towards each other. But now, having actually lived with other people in dorms, it's kind of funny how cartoonish and unrealistically mean Silver and Ancrua are to each other, knowing that realistically, a real roommate situation, no two roommates could ever get along being that rude to each other. So chapter 2 introduces Jade, Silver's sister, who is a witch, and Deck, who is kind of her talking cat companion, a la Salem from Sabrina the Teenage Witch. I remember being really fond of their conversations when I was writing them, and honestly, I still think it's some of my best work in this fiction. Their relationship is sort of quippy and playful in a way that I feel like in cartoons are only really reserved for villains. And that's kind of the whole thing with Jade in the earlier chapters. You don't really know if she's going to be a villain or a hero, if she's going to help Silver, or if she's going to cast her out and choose to become a witch, with all the kind of witchy stereotypes that exist in the Winx Club thanks to the Tricks and Selena. And speaking of stereotypical witch things, part of what the end of chapter 2 and then chapter 3 does is that it establishes the love triangle. Maybe it's because I'm still scarred from Fate the Winx saga, but I've got some real mixed feelings about this love triangle. So Silver and Jade both have feelings for their mutual childhood friend Michael, who's a specialist, and Silver's just gonna go for it, you know, like she likes him. At first, she thinks he's clueless to her feelings, but then he asks her out, and she's like, of course. But Jade also has feelings for him, and Silver isn't aware of this. But Jade also isn't going to try to pursue Michael because she knows that she's a witch and Silver's a fairy. And if we know anything about witches in Winx Club, it's that they are never successful in love. And so the conflict then becomes, is Jade just going to let Silver have Michael, or is she going to be a real witch about it and try to take Michael for herself? The thing about this love triangle is that I think, at least from my rereading of it, it's very clear from early on that Jade really isn't going to try to get in her sister's way. And so on one hand, it's important for Jade's character because it shows that she's kind of like nicer than the average witch, basically, in that she's not really that power hungry and she doesn't get jealous over petty things like boys. But it also deflates some of the tension out of the conflict, because even though all of the other characters think that Jade is going to try to abuse her power to steal Michael, it's pretty clear, at least from Jade's perspective, that that really isn't gonna happen. I don't know. If you've read Winx Club Evolved and you have any opinion on this, let me know in the comments below, because like I said, I'm kind of 50-50 about it. Chapter 4 is pretty basic. There's not really much to mention here. It's all about Silver and Ancrua going together to Cloud Tower to try to convince Jade to join the Winx Club. Ancrua is of course very hesitant about Silver's idea of forming a new Winx Club, but she becomes less hesitant when Silver saves her from some attacking bats. 5 and 6 are also pretty basic, particularly 5. Silver gets separated from Ancrua, but she continues on to Cloud Tower School for Witches to try to convince Jade to join the Winx Club. But of course, she does it at the exact wrong time during the Witches Gala, where witches try to ally themselves with wizards in order to earn their Gloomix. And it looks like Jade is just about to find herself a wizard to pair up with when Silver interrupts the Witches Gala and ruins everything. These two chapters are important because it introduces Famine, who's kind of a counter love interest for Jade. He's kind of a dark counterpart to Michael because, you know, while Michael is a specialist, Famine is a dark wizard, or at least, you know, he fancies himself a dark wizard because he's really actually kind of clumsy and pathetic. Also, his outfit description is absolutely ridiculous. I'm gonna get to outfits at the end, but I'll warn you in advance, his outfit description in particular is pretty silly. But yeah, the final chapter that I read during the live stream last Friday was chapter 7, in which Silver, Ancrua, and Jade have to combine their powers to create a conversion spell in order to escape the witches. This whole chapter is literally just dedicated to trying to force Ancrua to work as a team with the two sisters, and to let Silver start hinting that, you know, maybe she still is hoping that Jade will give up her witch status and become a fairy. So obviously, because this is a Winx Club fanfiction, I wanted everybody's wardrobe to be pretty reminiscent of the original show, but honestly, I think think if I had started writing this now, instead of trying to stay faithful to the wardrobe from the original show, I would have probably taken some more creative liberties. I'm just gonna read off Thamon's outfit description first because I think it's the funniest. Okay, she turns around to find a tall, thin wizard with short black hair and glasses. He wears a long black coat with a matching fedora and with a red vest and a ruffled shirt. He presses a gloved finger close to his lip with an uncertain expression. So Thamon is basically an incel. Obviously, I wanted his look to kind of be reminiscent of the Wizards of the Black Circle from season 4, who all kind of ride that line between punk, goth, alternative, hybrid. But I do remember not wanting Thamon to be just a carbon copy of that. I actually do remember wanting Thamon to physically kind of be a bit of a poser. So I do like the idea of him wearing kind of an imitation Wizard of the Black Circle type outfit, but to have it not completely work. But I think the way that the prose explains his outfit, it's almost a little too straightforward, so it makes it seem like it's totally okay that a wizard is dressed like this. And I think some changes in the prose and dialogue would make it a little more obvious that he's not quite top level super cool wizard. And so Silver, she's basically our main character. I describe her as having a very classic early 2000s look with a dress and jeans underneath. At the time, Y2K was not a trend at all. And so if I were to recreate the outfits now, I would definitely have the Y2K trend in mind. But the funny thing about Y2K is it incorporates some fashion elements from the 2000s, but it's not like a faithful recreation. And so I'm pretty certain dress over jeans is not included as part of the Y2K aesthetic, at least I don't think so. So if I were to design her outfit now, I would probably, yeah, incorporate some more popular Y2K elements, a lot of cropped top options, maybe with some bootcut or flared jeans, ooh, maybe a bucket hat. I really hope Y2K sticks around for at least a little bit longer, because as soon as I'm allowed to go out and buy my own clothes again, it's definitely a trend that I'm at least gonna dip my toe into. So yes, definitely Y2K for Silver, especially because she's got a silver pink pastel color pattern going on. Her main color is silver, obviously with her silver hair. And her general accent color is kind of a pastel pink, but especially in the civilian outfits, I feel like you could pair the silver color with a lot of other pastels and it would complement it pretty well. Now, Ankura, our other fairy, honestly, at least in these first 7 chapters, I didn't include a lot of details about her outfit. She's a bookworm, competitive, and a hard worker, so I feel that light academia would pair best with Ankura, especially because one of the few details I do include about her in these early chapters is that she regularly wears glasses. I could see her in a lot of mini or midi skirts with maybe like a soft blouse up top, with maybe something more structured or geometrical for more fun casual outfits. Now Jade could go in a lot of different directions. I kind of had her in one of the casual, generic punk goth outfits that we see a lot of the background witches in, with a cold shoulder top with detached sleeves and mini skirt. I remember at the time of writing this, I debated on whether or not to make her a scene kid, but even by 2015, scene was really dying as a trend, and I just felt that the big hair and really loud colors of the scene trend just really wasn't a good fit for Jade. But now it's 6 years later, and a big question sort of crossed my mind in terms of Jade's aesthetic. Is Jade an e-girl? I feel like the darker color palette of e-girl fits Jade better. And I feel that even in the original design, Jade was already a fan of miniskirt with some kind of structured accent top. Really matches up well with e-girl. However, I feel like the e-girl aesthetic is very accessory heavy with all of the harnesses and straps and belts and doodads. And I don't know if that element of the aesthetic would be a good fit for Jade, just because I feel like Jade isn't really an accessory heavy person. All of her early scenes emphasize how much she is dedicated to her study of magic, and so I feel like having all of these accessories on her at all times would detract from the core element of her character, especially considering that Silver has a very particular love for jewelries and crystals and diamonds, being the fairy of the diamond moon. And so to contrast that, I feel like Jade's design should be very utilitarian and stripped down. So in conclusion, I feel like if I were to redesign Jade today, I would add some elements from e-girl aesthetic, but I would keep her more in the tradition of kind of goth and grunge. So yeah, that's me going over the first 7 chapters of Winx Club Evolved and talking about some of the things I might have done differently had I started writing the story today as opposed to 6 years ago. It was honestly really fun to reflect on this fanfiction that, yes, I am currently still writing, but I did start writing quite some time ago when I was a very different person in a very different place in my life, and also my writing style was very different. If you would like me to continue reading Winx Club Evolved live, do let me know. Next Friday is going to be a regular work stream as usual, and then Monday I am going to try the live fanfiction reading again, but it's not going to be Winx Club Evolved this time. I'm actually finally going to fulfill a request to read Lord of the Rings fanfiction, but it's going to be a random Lord of the Rings fanfiction, so the stream might possibly be mature. I'm not sure, because like I said, I'm reading a random fanfiction. So if you're interested in that, that will be on Monday at 2 p.m. And until then, I will see you next time.